When I purchased my first ever Invicta watch, I knew that it would be fun because I chose a very fun looking Invicta. But what surprised me about this one is just how well made it is. And because it has been so much fun and it is so well made, that is probably why this one has been such a disappointment to me. Not because of the watch, but because of the proportions of this watch. Invicta is known to make bigger watches, and I was kind of hoping that this one might be a little bit different because of the case shape, but it is a large watch. So large, in fact, that it's really pushed past the boundaries of my wrist, and it means that I haven't really ended up wearing it. Hello, you're watching James. My name's James, you're watching me, and I am talking about watches. And there's something that I say fairly often in regards to sizes of watches, and that is the style of watch can forgive size of watch. Certain watches can be bigger because they suit the style of the watch. And I think this one from Invicta, that is certainly true. However, Invicta took it a little bit too far and made it a little bit too big, and that forgiveness of the size because of the style, well, there are limits, and unfortunately this one has gone past that. But I'm still so glad that I purchased this one because I really wanted to get hands-on with an Invicta, and not one of the standard ones that enthusiasts tend to buy. I wanted to buy something a little bit different, something a little bit fun, but also something that I thought might be interesting. And this one is definitely interesting, but I'm so glad that I bought it because I now get to experience the quality of Invicta watches. I really had no real preconceptions. I've heard lots of negativity about the brand, but then I've also heard a lot of positivity about the brand. So it was just nice to get hands-on with one, put it on wrist, and then realize that this is not just a gimmick. This is actually a fun watch that is well made, but unfortunately I can't end up really wearing it because of the size. But when I say dimensions, it's only actually one dimension that is an issue, because it's not the case. The case from left to right is 40.3 millimeters. That's a nice size. The height of the watch is 12 millimeters. That's a nice height. The lug width is quite big at 26, but it kind of suits the style of the watch. The weight is 112 grams, which is pleasant. It's the lug to lug. The lug to lug of this one is 60. Yes, 66, 0 millimeters. And that is beyond the realistic sort of size of my wrist. It goes beyond the boundaries that I can comfortably wear. It's something that I can put on and have a little bit of fun with, but it is certainly something that I then take off, because as you look at it on my wrist, you'll see it overhangs my 17 centimeter wrist. So instead about worrying too much about how it looks on wrist, let's just dive into this watch a little bit more, because you might be looking at it and you might have a much bigger wrist than I do, and you might be able to support it, but it's worth looking at the details because the details have been rather surprising. And I'll start by talking about the actual watch itself. And what is quite funny is I'm only going to spend a few moments on this because it's probably the least interesting part about this whole entire package. But the watch itself is powered by a quartz movement. It is a two-handed movement with an hour and a minute hand. They are all polished with a tiny little bit of lume. It has a slight sunburst black background. But the one feature about it that I think is quite interesting is the hour markers actually sort of look a lot like the ball bearing that is then used in the pinball game. Of course, you then got Invicta there as well, which also is applied. But let's look beyond that, because that is probably the least interesting point about this entire watch. The fun part about this watch is that pinball game, and it is a completely functional spring-loaded launcher that launches that little ball bearing. Now, nothing within the game itself moves other than the launching mechanism, which is slightly disappointing. It would be quite nice to have little flappers on the side, but I can imagine that might be a little bit difficult to actually put together. But when you actually look at the main part of the game itself, there is a lot of depth and detail and surprising quality of the parts on that game surface. I didn't expect, especially under macro photography, to see details, quality and finishing, that the way that these sort of bumpers and bits and pieces and elements of the game to be the quality that they actually are. Now, the case itself has a lot of presence to it, partly because of the overall size, but also because of the interesting shape. It has a slight curvature to it, and if you look down the length of it, you'll see there's some curvature to those two crystals, but you'll see that there's also some brushing on the top, mostly polishing on the side, but then there's a step down from the sort of top of the watch down to the side case, then down onto the lugs. And those different angular features and those different surface types create quite a rather interesting effect. And you'll see the crown of the watch itself is on the left, and I'm going to assume that's to try and not get in the way of actioning the game itself. When you look at the rear of the watch, you'll see there's a heap of information telling you that it is an Invicta, it's the Hruodland or something, the model. It shows you that there are those little flippers on the bottom, that it has 30 meters of water resistance, that it has a flame fusion crystal. And I have no idea what that means, but this particular model, if you are interested, is 35450. And this specific model number relates to the silver version of this watch. I like silver, which is why I went silver, but if you want something a little bit different and you like this watch, there are a couple of other versions too. I think there's like a blue one, and then there's a sort of almost bronzy kind of look watch, and they have slightly different model numbers. And then beyond that, you've got a very substantial leather strap. It is a crocodile style strap. I'm not sure how much leather is involved. It doesn't smell like leather, but in hand it feels very nice, and it has a great set of hardware too. And I've ended up with a little bit of a dilemma with this watch because I know it's too big for my wrist, but I really like it and I want to wear it. So I've ended up wearing it a little bit at home, but I don't think I've ever taken it out of the house. It's one of those ones which I put on for a little bit of fun, but then end up swapping out, which means I am going to end up selling this one. There's no point having this watch in my collection if I'm not really going to wear it. But what I am really happy about is that I gave myself the opportunity to own a watch from Invicta. And it means that I want to buy another one. I'm now going to spend some time, over a fair amount of time, trying to find perhaps one that better fits me, but also has this same fun factor. And whilst you wait for me to find one of those, and it could take some time, maybe you could watch one of my other videos next.